The crowd pressed against him that morning in Capernaum, but there was one man Jesus refused to touch. The Gospel of Mark mentions it in a single phrase most readers skip over: a man wearing fine linen. Historians now know what that meant in first-century Galilee. Purple-dyed linen wasn't just expensive, it was a marker. The Pharisees used it to identify those they considered spiritually compromised. But there's something deeper here, something the early church fathers whispered about in locked rooms, something found in texts the church councils desperately tried to erase. Jesus stepped back from that man, not because of judgment, but because of what he could see that we cannot. The color purple carried a frequency, and the archons knew exactly how to trace it. You've probably never heard that word before. Archons. The term appears in Gnostic texts discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945, buried in an Egyptian desert for over 16 centuries. These weren't heretical fantasies. They were warnings from early Christian communities who understood spiritual warfare in ways we've completely forgotten. The archons were described as parasitic entities, invisible rulers of this material realm, feeding on human consciousness, tracking the chosen ones who threatened their control. And according to these texts, they used specific visual markers to identify their targets. Colors weren't just aesthetic choices in the ancient world, they were spiritual broadcasts. Jesus knew this. The gospel accounts are filled with details about clothing that seem random until you understand the code. When the soldiers mocked Christ, they didn't choose just any robe. They draped him in purple. Matthew 27:28 records it clearly. That wasn't coincidence. It was ritual humiliation with a deeper layer. Purple was the color of Roman imperial authority, yes, but in the spiritual texts Jesus would have known from his studies in Egypt and the mystery schools, purple represented the material realm's claim over spirit. To wrap the Son of God in purple was to symbolically bind him to the archonic frequency. But here's what changes everything. 3 days before his arrest, Jesus gave specific instructions to his disciples about what they should and shouldn't wear when they went out to spread his message. This teaching appears in fragments of the Gospel of Thomas, saying 37, though most translations obscure the meaning. The disciples asked him, "When will you reveal yourself to us?" And Jesus answered, "When you disrobe without being ashamed, and take your garments and place them under your feet like little children and trample them, then you will see the Son of the Living One, and you will not be afraid." Scholars debated this for decades. What garments? Why trample them? Then, in 2011, a papyrus fragment emerged from a private collection in Jerusalem. It contained an expanded version of that saying with one additional line that changed everything. "Remove the purple and the scarlet, for these are the chains that weigh upon your light." The collector kept it secret for 7 years, afraid of what it implied. When it finally reached academic circles, 3 universities tried to acquire it. The Vatican offered an undisclosed sum. It's now locked in a temperature-controlled vault, unavailable for public study, but 12 researchers saw it before it disappeared. I spoke with one of them. She told me Jesus was explicit about color in his private teachings. Purple and scarlet weren't just forbidden for their association with Roman power or temple corruption. They operated on a frequency that made the wearer visible to what the Gnostics called the archons, what medieval mystics called the watchers, what desert fathers called the hunters of souls. When you wear these colors, you emit a specific vibration that these entities can track across vast distances. Think of it like a homing beacon. You become findable in the spiritual realm. Now I know what your rational mind is saying. This sounds impossible. Colors are just reflected light wavelengths. How could they possibly affect spiritual dimensions? But the ancient world didn't separate the physical and spiritual the way we do now. They understood something we've forgotten in our materialist age. Everything is frequency. Everything is vibration. And certain frequencies create vulnerabilities in the human energy field that malevolent forces have learned to exploit over millennia. The Book of Enoch, considered scripture by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and quoted directly in the New Testament book of Jude, describes this in astonishing detail. Chapter 8 explains how the fallen angels taught humans forbidden knowledge, including the beautifying of the eyelids and all kinds of costly stones and all coloring tinctures. Why would cosmetics and dyes be listed alongside weapons and enchantments as forbidden knowledge? Because the Watchers, those fallen angels, taught humans how to alter their spiritual frequency through external adornment. They were creating trackable signatures. Purple dye in the ancient world came from the murex snail. Thousands of snails died to produce a single gram of dye. The Phoenicians controlled the trade and guarded the process like a state secret. But according to fragments found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically in the War Scroll document, purple dye production involved a 7-day ritual that invoked specific principalities. The dyers weren't just artisans, they were initiates. Every bolt of purple cloth carried an energetic imprint that connected the wearer to those principalities. When you wore purple, you were quite literally clothing yourself in an archonic frequency. Jesus knew this because he spent those missing 18 years of his life studying in the mystery schools of Egypt and India. The Gospel accounts skip from age 12 to 30. Where was he? Tibetan manuscripts speak of Saint Isa, who studied in their monasteries. Egyptian Coptic traditions describe Yeshua learning from the priest